There is a reason so many people cut salt, try to eat healthier, do everything they think is right, and still watch their blood pressure stay stubbornly high. And once you understand the hidden battle happening inside your body every single day, you are never going to look at a salt shaker, a canned soup, or even a banana the same way again. Because the real issue is not just sodium. That is only half the story. The other half, the missing half, is potassium. And when those two fall out of balance, your arteries pay the price in a way that can quietly push you towards stroke, heart failure, kidney damage, and years of unnecessary medication. I'm Dr. Aliza Wright, and today I need to show you something that most people with high blood pressure were never clearly taught. They were told to avoid salty foods. They were warned about chips, fast food, restaurant meals, maybe processed meats. And yes, that advice matters, but it is incomplete because blood pressure is not just a story about too much sodium. It is also a story about too little potassium. And when you miss that second part, you can spend years trying to lower your numbers while continuing to eat in a way that keeps your body locked in the exact imbalance that drives those numbers up. Before we begin, please subscribe to this channel for clear, life-saving health advice that helps you protect your heart naturally. And I mean that sincerely because what you are about to learn can change how you shop, how you eat, how you understand your blood pressure readings, and maybe even how you speak with your doctor at your very next visit. By the end of this video, you will know why sodium raises pressure, why potassium helps bring it back down, why simply eating less salt often fails, and which seniors must be very careful before increasing potassium, because for some people, the wrong advice can be dangerous. Let me start with Walter, because his story reveals the mistake that traps thousands of people. Walter was 72, retired, disciplined, serious about his health. The moment his doctor told him his blood pressure was rising, he declared war on table salt. He stopped salting his eggs. He stopped salting his vegetables. He even threw out the salt shaker from the dining room table. And he felt proud of himself because in his mind, he had solved the problem. But 3 months later, his blood pressure was higher, not lower. 148 over 88 became 156 over 92. He looked at me and said, "I don't understand. I barely touch salt anymore." And that sentence told me everything. Because Walter had removed the salt he could see, but he was still drowning in the sodium he couldn't. His breakfast was packaged cereal and toast. His lunch was canned soup and crackers. His dinner was deli turkey on bread with a side of healthy, low-fat cottage cheese. And almost every one of those foods was carrying sodium into his bloodstream all day long. Not from the shaker, from the factory, from the box, from the can. This is what most people never realize. The biggest sodium problem is rarely the pinch you add at the table. It is the sodium already built into the food before it ever reaches your kitchen. And here is where the story gets even more important. Because if high blood pressure were only caused by sodium, then lowering sodium alone would solve everything. But that is not how human physiology works. Your blood pressure is shaped by a relationship, a constant tug of war between sodium and potassium. And when sodium is high while potassium is low, your body becomes far more likely to retain fluid, tighten blood vessels, and push pressure upward. You are not just asking, how much salt did I eat? You are asking, what kind of environment did I create inside my body today? And that internal environment determines whether your arteries stay flexible and calm or stiff and overpressured. Let me tell you about Irene, 69, who thought potassium meant bananas and nothing more. Every morning she ate one banana and believed she had checked the box. She would say, "I'm getting my potassium, doctor." But her diet the rest of the day was frozen meals, cheese, bread, salad dressing, and restaurant takeout. And her blood pressure stayed high enough that she assumed her body was simply broken. It wasn't. Her food pattern was, one banana could not possibly counterbalance a full day of high sodium, low potassium eating. That is like trying to empty a flooded basement with a teacup. Helpful in theory, meaningless in practice. So what exactly is sodium doing? Sodium helps regulate fluid balance, nerve signals, and muscle function. You need some of it to live. Sodium is not evil. And that matters because I do not want you leaving this video terrified of every grain of salt. The problem is excess. When sodium intake stays too high, your body tends to hold on to more water. More water in the bloodstream means more volume pressing against artery walls. Now your heart has to push against a higher load. Your vessels experience greater strain. Over time, that persistent pressure damages the lining of the arteries and increases risk for heart attack, stroke, kidney disease, and cognitive decline. And what does potassium do? Potassium is one of the great balancing forces in blood pressure control. It helps your body get rid of more sodium through the urine, and that alone is powerful. The more effectively your kidneys can release excess sodium, the less fluid your body tends to hold. But potassium does something else that is just as important. It helps relax the walls of blood vessels. Think about that for a moment. One mineral is pulling in the direction of fluid retention and vascular stress when it is too high. The other is helping push the system towards sodium removal and vessel relaxation when it is present in the right amount. Now let me show you how this plays out in real life, because this is where people suddenly recognize themselves. Gloria was 75. Her ankles swelled by evening. Her rings felt tighter some days than others. She would wake up puffy after restaurant meals and assume it was just age. And, yes, age changes the body, but this was more specific than that. When we looked closely, her pattern was obvious. Salty dinners, low intake of vegetables, very little fruit, almost no beans, and hardly any potassium-rich whole foods. Her body was living in a constant state of sodium dominance, not dramatic enough to send her to the emergency room, just enough to quietly keep her pressure elevated day after day. This is why the secret is not stop eating sodium forever. That message is too simplistic and honestly not very useful. The real secret is restoring balance. Lower the sodium burden, yes, but at the same time, increase potassium-rich whole foods so your body has the tools to push back. And when people do both, that is often when blood pressure starts to move in the right direction. Not because of a miracle, not because of a trendy superfood, but because the physiology finally makes sense again. The body is no longer being pushed in one direction all day without any counterforce. And here is something almost nobody explains clearly enough. Processed food does a double kind of damage. It usually gives you more sodium than you realize, while also giving you much less potassium than your body needs. And that combination is the real trap. Fresh foods, especially fruits, vegetables, beans, potatoes, yogurt, and some fish, naturally bring potassium to the table. Ultra-processed foods often do not. So the more your diet shifts toward boxes, wrappers, drive-thrus, frozen trays, and shelf-stable convenience meals, the more likely you are to create the exact mineral imbalance that keeps blood pressure stubbornly high even when you think you are watching your salt. Let me tell you about Samuel because his daily menu looked ordinary, even reasonable, until we took it apart. Breakfast was toast with margarine and a bowl of tomato soup because it was easy on his stomach. Lunch was a turkey sandwich with pickles and mustard. Dinner was a frozen chicken dinner labeled light. And he ended most evenings with pretzels because he wanted something not sweet. Nothing on that list sounded outrageous to him, but the sodium load was massive, while the potassium content was embarrassingly low. Hardly any vegetables, no beans, very little fresh produce, almost no naturally potassium-rich foods. His blood pressure wasn't mysterious. It was being built meal by meal. That is why one of the most powerful strategies is not just subtraction, but replacement. Do not only ask, what should I cut out? Ask, what should I crowd in? And that question changes everything. Instead of only removing salty foods, you start adding foods that shift the internal chemistry in your favor. A baked potato instead of fries from a fast food bag. Beans added to soup instead of crackers on the side. Plain yogurt with fruit instead of a packaged pastry. Spinach, lentils, tomatoes, sweet potatoes, squash, oranges, kiwi, leafy greens, low-fat dairy, and fish become more than healthy foods. They become blood pressure tools. Now, I need to destroy one myth before it hurts you. The myth is that bananas are the answer. Bananas are fine. Bananas are useful. Bananas are not magic. And if the only potassium-rich food you ever think about is a banana, you are going to miss the much bigger picture. A lot of seniors either dislike bananas, worry about sugar, or simply get bored with them. That is okay. Potassium is found in many foods: potatoes, sweet potatoes, beans, lentils, spinach, tomato products, yogurt, avocado, cantaloupe, prunes, oranges, and certain fish can all help. The goal is not banana worship. The goal is a dietary pattern that consistently tilts away from sodium overload and toward potassium sufficiency. Let me make this practical. Suppose your breakfast has two options. Option 1 is a toasted bagel with processed cream cheese and a side of bacon. Option 2 is plain yogurt, berries, a few nuts, and a small bowl of oatmeal with fruit. And these are not morally different meals. This is not a lecture about good people and bad people. But physiologically, they take your blood pressure in different directions. One tends to bring in more sodium and less potassium. The other tends to bring in more potassium, more fiber, and less sodium. Repeat that pattern across breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and the effect compounds over weeks and months in a way you can actually measure. This is also why eating plans centered on fruits, vegetables, beans, low-fat dairy, nuts, and whole grains have been shown again and again to support lower blood pressure. They do not work because they are fashionable. They work because they are built around the very mineral balance we are discussing. And once you understand that, you stop seeing nutrition advice as random rules. It becomes coherent. Of course, blood pressure improves when a person moves from processed, salty, potassium-poor foods toward whole, minimally processed, potassium-rich foods. You are changing the chemistry, the fluid balance, the vascular tone, and often the calorie quality of the diet all at once. Now let's talk about the number that sneaks up on nearly everyone. The average adult often consumes far more sodium than recommended, usually well above what the heart and blood vessels would prefer. And the shocking part is that many people do this without eating food that tastes especially salty. Bread contributes, sandwich meats contribute, soups contribute, sauces contribute, frozen meals contribute, restaurant food contributes. When each item seems moderate on its own, the total can still become enormous by evening. That is why relying on your tongue is a terrible strategy. If a food doesn't taste aggressively salty, that does not mean it is low in sodium. Your taste buds are not a laboratory. Let me tell you about Patricia, 71, who said something I hear all the time. She told me, "I switched to low sodium soup, so I'm doing better." But when we looked at the label, one serving was lower than the original version? Yes. The problem was she was eating the whole can, which contained 2.5 servings. And suddenly that healthy choice became a sodium bomb she had been eating several times a week. Reduced sodium does not mean low sodium. Lightly salted does not mean heart-friendly. Multigrain does not mean potassium-rich. Organic does not mean blood pressure safe. Marketing language is designed to make you relax. Your arteries do not care what the front of the package says. So here is one of the smartest habits you can develop. Turn the package over. Look at sodium per serving, then look at how many servings you actually eat. And if you only learn one shopping skill from this video, learn that one. Because people do not usually fail from ignorance alone. They fail because the food environment is designed to blur the truth. When you begin reading labels with blood pressure in mind, you start seeing the pattern everywhere. The healthy wrap, the canned chili, the bottled dressing, the bread you buy every week, the crackers you snack on at night. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. But I need to be careful here because I do not want you swinging from one mistake into another. Some people hear a message like this and think, fine, I'll just take potassium supplements. No, slow down. And this is the part where a natural solution can become a dangerous one if used carelessly. Potassium from food is one thing. Potassium pills and salt substitutes are another. For healthy people with normal kidney function, dietary potassium from whole foods is usually handled beautifully. The kidneys remove what the body does not need. But if your kidneys are impaired, or if you are on certain medications, Increasing potassium too aggressively can push you into hyperkalemia, which means potassium in the blood becomes too high. Let me tell you about Leonard, because his story is one every senior needs to hear. Leonard was 78 and wanted to do everything right. He heard that salt substitutes could help lower blood pressure, so he bought one immediately. He started sprinkling it on eggs, vegetables, chicken, even cottage cheese. And he felt virtuous because he had replaced sodium with potassium. But Leonard also had chronic kidney disease and was taking medication for blood pressure that already affected potassium handling. Within weeks, he felt weak, nauseated, and strangely tired. A blood test showed his potassium was dangerously elevated. The problem wasn't that he cared about his health. The problem was that nobody had warned him that natural does not automatically mean safe. So listen carefully to this next part, because it matters enormously. If you have kidney disease, reduced kidney function, heart failure, certain endocrine problems, or you take medications such as ACE inhibitors, ARBs, or potassium-sparing diuretics, do not start loading up on potassium supplements or salt substitutes without talking to your clinician first. And I do not say that to scare you. I say it because your heart literally depends on the potassium level in your bloodstream staying within the right range. Too little is a problem. Too much is also a problem. Blood pressure advice should never ignore kidney function and medication context, especially in older adults. This is where the conversation becomes mature and responsible. I am not telling you to throw away your medication. I am not telling you food always replaces prescriptions. And anyone who promises that to everybody is not being honest with you. Some people can improve blood pressure enough through diet, weight loss, exercise, and stress management that medication needs go down. Some cannot. Many need both. What I am telling you is that if you continue eating in a way that keeps sodium high and potassium low, you may be forcing your medication to fight uphill every single day. And if you fix that imbalance, you give your treatment plan a much better chance to work. Let's make this real with a day of eating, because concepts are helpful, but meals are what change numbers. Morning comes. Instead of toast, processed meat, and cheese, imagine breakfast as oatmeal topped with berries and a side of plain yogurt, or eggs with sautéed spinach and a small baked sweet potato. And right there, without anything extreme, you have already moved away from sodium-heavy convenience foods and toward potassium-rich, fiber-rich choices. Even small breakfast changes matter because they set the tone for the entire day. You are no longer starting the morning with a fluid-retaining, artery-tightening sodium load before your body has even had a chance to settle. Lunch is where many seniors unknowingly sabotage themselves. Sandwiches look harmless. Soup feels comforting. Crackers feel light. But together, they can deliver a huge sodium burden with very little potassium in return. And that is the hidden pattern. So instead, think in terms of rebuilding lunch around whole foods. A bowl of lentil soup made with less salt ingredients. A salad with beans, tomato, cucumber, olive oil, and grilled chicken or salmon. A baked potato topped with plain Greek yogurt and vegetables. These are not fancy wellness meals. These are practical, pressure-lowering meals because they do what the physiology requires. Less sodium pressure, more potassium support. Dinner is where the body often takes its biggest hit, especially if it comes from takeout, a restaurant, or a frozen tray. One savory meal can push sodium through the roof, and many restaurant dishes deliver more than half, sometimes nearly all, of what some people should have in an entire day. That is the trap. The meal tastes satisfying, then you wake up puffier, thirstier, and heavier the next morning, and your blood pressure often reflects that. A home-cooked dinner built around fish, beans, roasted vegetables, brown rice, sweet potato, squash, tomato, or leafy greens gives your body an entirely different message. Not deprivation, direction. And let me say something that surprises people. You do not have to make food miserable. Herbs, lemon, garlic, vinegar, onion, pepper, cumin, paprika, dill, basil, rosemary, thyme, and salt-free seasoning blends can make food deeply satisfying without drowning it in sodium. And yes, your taste buds may protest at first. That is normal. People adapted to salty foods often interpret less salt as no flavor for a while, but that changes. I have seen it over and over. After a few weeks, many people find restaurant food shockingly salty and heavily processed snacks almost unpleasant. The tongue retrains, the brain retrains. The body often thanks you in the form of lower readings. Now, if you want to know how quickly this can matter, here's the encouraging part. Blood pressure can respond to sodium reduction and improve dietary patterns within weeks, not years. And that is important because people often quit too early. They make a few changes for 4 days, do not see perfection, and assume food does not work. But the body is adapting in stages. Fluid balance changes, vascular tone changes, weight may shift a bit, inflammation may decrease. Sometimes the first thing people notice is less bloating, fewer swollen fingers, or less ankle puffiness before the blood pressure log fully reflects the improvement. Stay with the process long enough to let the physiology catch up. Let me tell you about Denise, 73, because her story is one of the most hopeful I know. Denise did not become a health fanatic. She did not juice kale. She did not memorize every nutrient chart. She made 5 changes. She stopped buying canned soup unless it was clearly low in sodium. She replaced chips with fruit and yogurt most afternoons. She started adding beans or lentils to lunch. She cooked potatoes and greens twice a week. And she stopped relying on frozen dinners as her default evening meal. 6 weeks later, her home readings were consistently lower. Not perfect, not miraculous, just unmistakably better. And that quiet, measurable change restored her confidence that her body could respond. But here's the dark side of ignoring this issue. If you live in a pattern of high sodium and low potassium for years, the damage is often silent. You may feel mostly fine while your arteries stiffen, your kidneys strain, and your heart works harder than it should. And that is why high blood pressure has earned its terrifying reputation. It does not always announce itself with pain. Sometimes it simply advances, quietly, patiently. By the time symptoms become dramatic, the body may already be paying a heavy price. So this conversation is not about vanity or chasing perfect numbers. It is about whether your daily food pattern is helping preserve your future brain, kidneys, heart, and independence. And I need to address one more trap because I see it all the time. People try to solve blood pressure with one superfood while refusing to change the overall pattern. They ask about one juice, one supplement, one powder, one seed, one trick. And I understand the impulse. We all want simple answers. But blood pressure does not usually yield to gimmicks. It responds to patterns. The person who eats more beans, greens, fruit, yogurt, tomatoes, potatoes, and home-cooked meals while reducing packaged sodium sources will usually do better than the person searching for a magic product while living on deli meat, frozen trays, and restaurant soup. Your blood vessels care about repetition, not novelty. Here's another point most people miss. A food can be low in sodium and still not help you much if it brings nothing else to the table. That is why the goal is not merely finding foods that are not salty. The goal is choosing foods that actively improve the balance. And that means foods naturally rich in potassium, fiber, and other supportive nutrients. A plain cookie may be lower in sodium than pretzels, but it does not meaningfully move you toward a blood pressure-friendly pattern. A baked potato, lentils, spinach, kiwi, tomato, yogurt, or beans do. These foods do not just avoid harm. They contribute to repair, regulation, and balance. Now let's talk about the phrase that matters more than almost any other, from food. When possible, potassium should come from food, not from a handful of supplements you picked up because the bottle looked heart healthy, not from blindly using a salt substitute on every meal. And that distinction matters because whole foods bring potassium packaged with fiber, water, magnesium, phytonutrients, and satiety. Supplements do not. Food also tends to distribute potassium more gently across the day, which is much easier for the body to handle than taking concentrated doses without context. The safest and most sustainable improvement for most people begins in the produce aisle, the dairy case, the bean shelf, and the freezer section for plain vegetables. Let me show you how subtle some of the best changes can be. Instead of white toast with processed cheese, try whole grain toast with avocado and tomato. Instead of crackers beside soup, add beans and a side salad. Instead of fries at dinner, roast a potato or sweet potato. And instead of dessert every single night, occasionally choose fruit with plain yogurt or a few nuts. These are not punishments. They are mineral shifts. They are internal pressure shifts. They are the kind of choices that look ordinary from the outside, but can significantly change the sodium-potassium equation over time. And that equation is the hidden lever many people never knew they had. Now let me be precise, because I do not want false hope. If your blood pressure is very high, if you have symptoms, if you have kidney disease, chest pain, stroke warning signs, or your doctor has given you a specific plan, do not use this video as an excuse to delay care. And never stop blood pressure medication on your own just because you started eating better for a week. That is not wise medicine. That is gambling. Food is powerful, but it works best as part of a responsible plan. Good home measurements, follow up with your clinician, medication when needed, and dietary changes that are strong enough to matter and safe enough for your individual medical situation. If this helped you, subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who thinks lowering blood pressure is only about throwing away the salt shaker. Because for a lot of people, that misunderstanding has cost them years of frustration. And if you want me to make a follow-up video on the best potassium-rich foods for seniors, including who should avoid certain ones, tell me in the comments. Your heart, your kidneys, your brain, and your future deserve better than half the story. Now you know the whole picture. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.